What you see right here is basically the history of the microphone, minus the dynamic, that is. Here we have the original popular microphone, the Ribbon, represented by the Rode NTR. And Ribbons were known for having a natural sound due to having higher frequencies rolled off beyond 8K. Then on this side, you have the tube condenser microphone, represented here by the Rode NTK. And tube mics back in the day were much less gain hungry than the old Ribbon microphones, meaning these were easier to use, but were also better received because they boosted the high end. That was important back in the day because tape already had an inherent roll-off on the highs, so these things got tamed and just came across as really smooth. And then you have the FET condenser in the middle, represented by the Rode NT1. Now, these things took over as the go-to mic for the same reason as the old tube mics, but these things had a bit of an edge. First off, they were even brighter in the top end. Bonus, especially back in the analog tape days. But they were also less noisy, which also helped when layering take after take onto a tape. Anything that imparted less noise in the signal chain was welcome. But then as we moved into the digital age and we weren't rolling off any of that high end with tape or with radio, people started reaching back into their mic lockers for these old standards. Now, without all the roll-offs, these microphones had different characteristics, and some that were being celebrated in this new clarity we all had with digital recording landscapes. So then, with all these back in the saddle as decent choices for your studio, which one might be the right choice for you? By the way, I'm cycling through these microphones to give you a bit of an idea of what each one brings to the table for sound, so I hope that helps. Lots to cover here, so let's just dive right in. And yes, I do need to recognize this is a full Rode setup. Even the boom arms and the mic stand are all Rode. And of course, Rode did send me all of these microphones for review at one time or another, including this one that I received recently, the Rode NTK. This isn't necessarily a review though, but it is definitely showcasing it. Either way, Rode has no say in the outcome of this video or the opinions held herein. So take that however you like. And saying all that, let's get the FET mic out of the way here. We all know what it is and what it can do. It is the standard for recording. Exceptionally low noise, especially on the Rode NT1. I believe it has the lowest noise in the industry, if I recall. Now, we all know what this mic does and how it can be utilized anywhere. With plugins and all the digital wizardry that's possible, you can basically do anything with a microphone like this. So it's an obvious choice as your first mic for a studio. But I will still keep it around so you can hear the comparisons between that, the Ribbon, and the tube. Okay, so let's slide over some of the basic details here, as it isn't necessarily the most important part of your decision. The FET and the tube mics both work with internal amplification. The FET uses transistors and the tube uses, well, a tube for the amplification. This is why you end up with a very full and robust signal out of these two microphones. Also, how those two are powered is a bit different as well. Tube mics come with their own power supply, and FET mics generally run off of phantom power these days. The Ribbon microphone, on the other hand, is basically a dynamic microphone that works on similar principles. On a Ribbon mic, you have a small and extremely thin piece of corrugated metal that is suspended between two magnets. Movement of the thin piece of corrugated metal creates a small signal, which is why most Ribbon mics have extremely quiet output, even more so than dynamic mics like the SM7B. But some Ribbon mics, like this Rode NTR, have internal preamps to give them the boost they need. And this makes them more usable for more people since you don't need really loud and clean preamps on your interface. Now, one big difference between dynamic mics and Ribbon mics, though, is that phantom power can actually hurt Ribbon mics. Now, this is if the Ribbon mic doesn't have a preamp inside of it. Where dynamic mics aren't bothered by phantom, a straight-up Ribbon will not withstand the current flow and it will wreck it pretty quick. So keep that in mind if you're considering a Ribbon mic. Now on to character choice, and this is one of the drawbacks that people tend to see with FET mics. They're essentially meant for extreme clarity. That is basically the character of a FET microphone. The tube mic still rocks a lot of that clarity while still imparting some character on the audio though. Now, what that character is called harmonic distortion, and that is something that is present in the tube signal and is more pronounced at higher input levels. This is the characteristic warm sound of a tube microphone. Some people call it smooth, buttery. However you want to hear it, it's very analog, which is similar to a ribbon mic sound as well, which is kind of in between the FET and the tube. Ribbons are known for their detail, but also perceived as warmer or darker for several different reasons. It mainly comes down to the fact that ribbons do not recreate the whole 20 Hz to 20 kHz frequency response all that well. But this is also why a lot of people find the sound of a ribbon microphone to be the most natural, as most people don't hear in a linear line down that frequency response either. The roll-off on the ribbon mic tends to be considered similar to how the ear rolls off the high end. But if you're rocking a ribbon without an internal preamp, their need for high gain can really make the output sound noisy and less dynamic. And this one is rather unfortunate. Cost has become a massive issue, not only for the consumer, but also for the companies themselves. First up, FET condensers are cheap and easy for a lot of companies to make. Not only that, but there are tons of parts flying around from distributors out there to make one for yourself if you even wanted. Tube condensers tend to be a bit different though. Way more to their build, including their power supply, and not to mention the tube. The starting price of these mics tends to be much higher. And weirdly, while high-end ribbon mics are very much expensive and seemingly out of reach for most home studios, there tends to be several cheaper options to get started with, which is kind of odd considering what it takes to manufacture them and then to just sit them on the shelf since they're rather niche. Not sure why, but maybe it's good news for you. There are several that are very obtainable, including the ART AR5 as well as the SE VR1, which we do have a review of coming up soon. Stay tuned for that. And I guess it all comes down to your choice, and really, there's not a bad one. One of the biggest things you need to remember when you're going between the three of these microphones is that there's no project that was ever shelved because the wrong mic was used. These things are paintbrushes that impart their own impressions and swirls, but do not make the painter. In the hands of a 3-year-old, all paintbrushes are going to look bad. And in the hands of an artist, even a cheap paintbrush would be invisible in the final product. But for those of us somewhere between a beginner and a master, bringing something like a ribbon or a tube mic into the fold just gives us something new to wrap our brains around. A new way to cradle those frequencies and discover ways to unlock new sounds. Or perhaps just to find that perfect mic for that one instrument or even voice. So then, which one do you like? Are you Team FET, Team Ribbon, or Team Tube? Let me know down below. Cheers, guys, and thanks for watching.